So the typical adolescent brain is sort of moving back and forth between the more emotional and more rational parts of the brain, and it's more excited by rewards than by consequences. It also means that if you have the privilege of knowing a young person for several years, you might really notice how their thinking or their behavior changes. I have absolutely seen this happen myself. It's really kind of fun to get to be a part of. And lastly, young people's brains are really still developing. So this means that sometimes as adults, we might be setting an expectation, or we might be asking them to do something that their brain physically cannot do. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. So, of course, these are all generalizations, and individual young people are going to develop at different rates. But because that limbic system is developing earlier than the prefrontal cortex, what this means then is that young people are, of course, more likely to act on impulse. They're more likely to misread or misinterpret social cues and emotions. I think that's a really interesting one to think about. They're more likely to get into accidents of all kinds, and they're more likely to get involved in fights and to just generally engage in behavior that's considered more risky. However, as we have also seen, this is not the whole story. Adolescent brains are really also able to learn and adapt. They are wired for social connection. And I think it's interesting to think about this because as human beings, that is vital for our success. I also want to point out that taking risks isn't always necessarily a bad thing. Being able to go out for a new sport, that's taking a risk. Taking a trip to somewhere new, that's taking a risk, right? There are risks all the time. And I think we tend to think of risks as things that are negative, but in order to accomplish goals, in order to branch out, we have to take good risks too. And so learning how to take good risks is really an important part of becoming an adult. And so for all of these things, remember that young people are really sort of laying down the processes that they're going to use for the rest of their lives.